Hi, I'm Scott Lankford. I'm a professor of English at Foothill College here co-hosting API Heritage Month. My English 1C honors class is here with us and a large number of community members who are also joining us. I'm here also as part of the Global Educators Network, which is done in collaboration with Stanford Global Studies, and here to welcome a former Foothill professor of English, Samina Ali. So Samina, welcome back to Foothill College.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a huge pleasure. And this is not Samina's first visit back to our campus, but just to give you a little background before we plunge in, and I'm going to keep the intro very short because Samina does a pretty good job of telling you quite a bit about her own life and career on her own. But Samina Ali, when I first met Samina Ali, she had just come out of the University of Oregon. Did I get the right place? University of Oregon with a creative writing degree and MFA. And she was teaching English. And then she went on. She was a fantastic English professor, by the way, popular and amazing. But then she went on to launch her first international award-winning novel, Madras on Rainy Days, which was one of the very first novels published by a Muslim American author in the United States, focusing on the life of a young woman both in India and here in the United States. And so that was a breakthrough novel all by itself. She has then gone on to be a celebrated TED Talk speaker, a Huffington Post top writer. She is a curator, which you'll hear quite a bit about. And most recently, she's been teaching in the Bay Area creative writing. Right now she's teaching, recently she's been teaching for Stanford Continuing Studies in creative writing. So we are thrilled, Samina, so thrilled to have you back with us virtually.
Thank you.
And very much looking forward to learning more about your perspectives here as part of our Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. First question I wanted to ask you actually was to tell my students and the other people in the audience here a little bit about how did you do this miracle? I mean, last time I'm checked, I'm still teaching at Foothill College, and you are doing TED Talks and NPR radio shows and hosting international art exhibitions. And oh, I did not mention, about to launch her latest book, this time a memoir. So Samina, can you tell us a little bit about what the magic was there?
I'm not sure it was magic. I think it was more like it was timing. And timing that I couldn't have anticipated myself. What had happened is when I was in grad school working on I've always wanted to be a writer ever since I was very little. And when I went to grad school for writing, the popular thing at the time were novels written by Asian Americans. And a lot of those novels happened to be about the Asian American immigrant experience. And it was about how these people, how the main character had come to the US and how they were struggling to fit in, and how, there was this juxtaposition between the US culture versus their home culture. And that was the big thing at the time. And when I was reading a lot of these novels, one of the things that happened is I noticed that even though there were definitely books coming out from India, meaning writers who were writing about their experience as immigrants to the US coming from India, they were books written by people who were coming here from Bengal, from Mumbai, from different parts of India. But the one experience that wasn't being shared is what it actually means to be a Muslim coming out of India. There were Christians and Hindus, but there were no Muslims really at the time. And so that's really why I began writing, is because I just wanted to tell that specific story. And I also thought that it was kind of reductive what was happening with the whole immigrant experience. People were coming to the US, and these stories were talking about how much better it was in the US, and there was so much more freedom here, and women were more, free here, and people were freer here, and people were successful here, and compared to back home where they were just having a tough go of it. And it just was one narrative after another like that. And I was having a huge problem with that. And I didn't want to say, hey, it's the US versus your home country, because I don't think just immigrating to the US solves anyone's problems. I think the US has as many issues here as anywhere else in the world. So when I wrote my novel, I really wanted to show a more complicated and more nuanced experience. And that's how it began. So in grad school, that's what I did, is I began to show my main character is American, and she grows up, she's born in India, in Hyderabad, India, which is in the south of India. And she immigrates with her parents at a young age to the US. But none of my novel is set in the US. It's entirely set in India, because to me, I wanted to go back to my roots. I wanted to show what it means to be an American returning home to India for whatever experience that is. And I didn't want to say one country was better than the other. I just wanted to explore the complexities of it.
And I will add fondly that I taught the novel in my classes with amazing and enormous success. And I've recently been really gratified to continue to notice that it's considered quite a landmark in American literature and publishing. I mean, it had the virtue of being a first, but it's also a beautifully crafted, deeply felt, beautiful, unforgettable novel. And so it's wonderful that it still has a life out there, right? It has life. It has a life in the world, almost like a child, like there it is out there, and it's still taught widely, it's still cited widely, it's still quoted widely, and it's really gratifying at that point to see how that's going. Now, what happened beyond that point? So now, after winning the Prix des Etrangers and etc., what happened next? Because that wasn't the end of the story at all.
No, it wasn't. So what happened is, just like we couldn't have predicted that this would happen when we're all, sheltering in place because of the virus, what happened at that point is 9/11. And suddenly I went from living in a country that kind of didn't know much about what it means to be Muslim. And I was writing this book to really explore that and to show what it really means to be Muslim from India. And I want to stress from India, from Hyderabad, India, because obviously Muslims from all over the world are different. Their culture is different. There's no one Muslim community. There are hundreds of little Muslim communities all over. So my experience and my lens is as a Muslim woman who was born in Hyderabad, India, and raised with the Indian culture. And so it went from zero knowledge, or if they had any knowledge, it was some, maybe the Iran hostage thing that happened so long ago that I don't even have much memory of it, to 9/11 happening, and suddenly everyone was talking about Islam and everyone was talking about Muslims, and my novel was suddenly there. And that collision between what was happening in the US and around the world and my novel going out, it created publicity that I hadn't anticipated. And suddenly when I was out speaking about the book and speaking about my experience, I was getting just as many people asking me about what it means to be Muslim as I was getting people who were coming to just read the book and, be interested in the book.
Yeah, and I realized that I also kind of jumped a little bit further forward than I wanted to by starting at Foothill College, because by the time you were at Foothill, you were already an English professor, and you were already an MFA, and you had already gotten a creative writing degree. So can we like zoom back? Bad pun. Can we get in our Zoom time machine to teenage Samina Ali in the Midwest? And how did you get started writing, from the very, like early writers groups? I remember some of these stories, but can you tell us a little bit about teenage real Samina, what she was doing and how she got into this game?
So it's, on the one hand, I am this you know, Muslim from southern India. And on the other hand, I am a very typical Midwestern American because my parents immigrated from India to Minnesota. And Minnesota at that time was very, very white. So I was always the one brown student in all of my classes, and no one knew where India was. And I remember growing up, my parents were very insistent that I have two brothers, and they didn't want my brothers and me to forget that we were Indian, to forget our language, to forget our culture, to forget our religion. So every single year I was growing up, they would pull me out of school and they would drop my brothers and me into school in India. And then the school academic year, remember, is different. So in India, the summer is in March and April. And then they would pull us out of school in India, and then they would drop us into school in the US. So growing up, every time I came back to school in India, all of my classmates would be like, oh my God, the Indian girl is back. I mean, the American girl is back. The American girl is back. And every time I was dropped into school here, everyone would say, the Indian is back. The Indian is back. And so I went back and forth, and looking back, it was a truly bicultural, bilingual, you know, way of growing up. I was fully immersed in both cultures, but it was also very confusing. And of course, I didn't make that many friends, because who's going to be friends with someone who's going to be gone, you know, in a couple months anyway. So being immigrants, my parents wanted all of us to go into medicine or business or engineering. And being a writer was not something that they approved of. And it's the only thing that I've always known. And so I would lie on the ground in my bedroom, hiding behind the bed, so that if they came into the room, they wouldn't be able to see me. So I would lie on the ground with the bed as a shield, and I would write on the floor. And that's how I began writing. And I'll say, Scott, after the book came out, you know, I did several interviews for National NPR. I was in Vogue magazine. I was on the cover of Poets and Writers magazine. My mom came to visit me in San Francisco. I picked her up, and it just happened that on the drive home, my interview on National NPR was playing. And so we listened to it on the way home. She saw all of the magazines I was in. She saw the awards the book was getting. And when we got home to my house, she turned to me and said, well, now that's out of your system. Let's go back to business school. Oh. So it wasn't like congratulations and, you know, good for you or anything. It was just like, okay, your hobby's done.
Wow, that's that's quite a mom reaction. We've actually had a whole series of interviews for our guests here on English 1CH for API Heritage Month. Everyone, I think there's been when I shocked my family by telling them I was a writer stories, but I kind of like yours best. Okay, that's out of your system. Well, so then another thing that I so admire about you, Samina, as a friend, as a colleague, as a voice out there in the world, as a public intellectual, is that you've really been able not only to write about those who don't have a voice and give them a voice through your fiction and through your nonfiction, you have also been a brilliant advocate for bringing the voices and the art of Muslim women from around the world into a public sphere. And it's such a deep and powerful and profound thing to do. I mean, we both know a lot of writers, and I have to say that, love them as I do, they are sometimes all about themselves. And you, from the beginning, have always been about bringing forward voices from a whole world community. So tell us a little bit about that and how that has kind of evolved and where you're at with it now.
So what had happened is, like I said, after my book came out, my novel was released, and I was going around, you know, I toured with that book, believe it or not, for at least 2.5 years. And every time I would go to events and speak about it, I would get largely, you know, an American white audience, a lot of women, but there would always be a select few Muslims in that. And they would come up to me afterwards and they would say, keep going, sister, keep spreading the message. And I was like, well, join me, join me, join me. And no one would. So once I began to see that there was some sort of push, a push back against, you know, a very sort of traditional conservative Islam that was spreading, I decided that what needed to happen was that an American Muslim organization, like a feminist organization, needed to come into play. So I brought together 5 other women and we created that organization. And the first thing we did is one of the women in the organization, she was, one of the things that happened in the US is this, women were being asked in mosques around the US to enter the mosque through a back door or through the alleyway or through some other means, while men were just kind of walking through the front door. And they were also, women and children were also being pushed into back rooms or in basements and, you know, being shut off. And you couldn't really hear what was happening in the main sanctuary because you're taking care of kids and there's a lot of noise. And it just seemed really sexist. You know, why were, especially when you're thinking in different parts of the US, there's a lot of snow that, you know, I mean, and there could be wobbly steps, and there's nothing in Islam that says that this should happen. It's just one of those cultural, you know, traditions that was carried over from many different immigrant countries to the US. So our first action was to have a friendly, peaceful march into a mosque in West Virginia. And we 5 women, it was just the 5 of us. We 5 women marched into the front door of a mosque and we sat down in the main sanctuary and we prayed. And that small thing, and a lot of you can't imagine this, but there was a world before social media. And this happened back in 2004, before social media. And yet that little protest that we did went viral. I'm in Time magazine. There's a PBS documentary on it. The mosque, the idea that the mosques around the US should allow women to enter through the front door went all the way up into the most powerful organizations in the US, Muslim organizations, and they actually changed their bylaws because of what we did. Because of that, and because of the, you know, the kind of publicity we got, I was approached by the US State Department to begin to be an American Muslim ambassador. And I was sent to different parts of Europe to begin talking and creating bridges between those Muslim communities and their local governments at a time when we were at war. Bush was, you know, president, and we were at war with with Iraq, with Afghanistan, you know, saying we were at war, you know, against terror, but, you know, very specific countries. So that's how all of that started. It wasn't because I went in and said, I'm going to now be a speaker for Muslim women. It just kind of, you know, evolved into people saying, speak up for Muslim women. And I said, okay, here goes nothing.
Well, fantastic. And I think I should also mention, in terms of the format, for those of you that are joining us for the first time, usually spend, you know, the first part getting to know our speaker a little better. That's what we've been doing. Then our speakers typically, and Samina also, have some things that they would like to share with us. Samina is the kind of person who may be asking you the questions, but we will also, as soon as possible, begin to bring in your questions. If you put them in the chat room with a double question mark in the front, that way my co-host, Chris Harjati, and my other co-host, Shubham Ashar, can screen the questions, and we'll invite you in to ask your question. Again, I want to kind of warn you that if Samina is the kind of professor she usually is, the questions may come at you from her. In which case we'll be asking you all to volunteer to step forward. But let's go ahead, Samina, and see what do you have to share with us today? What's up next?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to do is as you said, I'm also a curator, and the International Museum of Women, which is now part of Global Fund for Women, asked me to curate a global exhibition for them. And I did that. It's a global exhibition that's on the web. It is a beautiful exhibition. So I'm gonna show you some of that. And the way I created that global exhibition is with my same message. It's the same message that I've always had, whether I'm writing, whether I'm, doing my activism work, whatever it is. It's to really showcase the diversity that exists within the Muslim community, especially among Muslim women, because we have very strong stereotypes about Muslim women. So my first question is a question that I ask everyone as I'm traveling around, basically, whether it's Europe or the US or different parts of the world. My first question is, and it's going to be, I know, very different for all of you, but what is the first image that comes to your mind when you think about a Muslim woman? What is the first image that comes to your mind when you think about a Muslim woman? So I would love to know what you guys think.
Right, and if you unmute yourself very briefly to answer this question, we'll get some answers from the audience.
Everyone's stunned silent.
Yes. This really, in past, this has also been she really is asking for what's the first image that comes to mind. She's not asking for the careful answer. She's asking.
Yeah. This is a sincere question. Because you can imagine that I get the craziest answers. And
so some people are saying someone reserved, a hijab wearing, skeptical. Those are some of the things that's been posted.
Thanks. You can keep reading off of those things. That would be great. And if anybody wants to hop in with their voice and or video, then that would be fine too.
I think of my close friend growing up who is Mexican and Indian, and I would just go to her family parties and they would have samosas and curry, and then they would have tacos, and I also was just like, wow, like this is a lot. But when her family would come, her mom wouldn't wear a hijab. She worked in business, so she would always wear like business suits, and she'd grown up in India, and her family, they would wear traditional hijabs and saris, and it would be really cool just to like be really immersed in their home to really see the culture in that way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I want a best friend like that where I can go and have biryani and burritos.
Okay, I'm gonna put a little bit of pressure on my 25 students that are in the Zoom room. If one or two of you could also share some first impressions. What do you think of when you think of Muslim women is the question, and either in the chat or on audio, if you could share, that would be great.
Hi, Samina. For me, the big thing is unfortunately, what is just, the image that has been pumped out in the news most often. It's a very one-dimensional image, and it is of a woman in a hijab that is modest and oppressed.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam.
Who's not allowed any agency, who has to take care of her children, is not allowed to leave the house without male accompaniment in a lot of countries. And I would narrow it more towards Arab countries specifically, as to what's been put out in the news so often.
Excellent.
Since I go to Indonesia very often to meet family, and Indonesia is actually like the world's largest Muslim majority country, which doesn't really get a lot of attention in the news. I kind of view them, since I actually have a lot of Muslim friends and like coworkers that I've been there. They're like actually like really nice people. They're not like what a lot of the media says is like, like these kind of burqa wearing women who have no agency and just submit to their husbands and male accomplices. And also, I think a lot of Muslim women actually are quite outspoken in terms of a lot of different issues. They just might show it in a different way than what the West might perceive as this strong, independent women kind of type.
Good. Thank you, Chris. That's really good insight, especially from someone from Indonesia, because people, as you can imagine, one of the top things that people say is, well, she's Arab, and that's.
Yeah, and since we're doing API Heritage Month, I'm lucky to have traveled in Indonesia, but most Americans don't realize that, China is the largest country by population on the planet. India, number 2, the United States, number 3, number 4 is Indonesia. It's the 4th largest country by population on the planet.
Exactly.
And it's also by far majority Indonesian. So it's often, I think, Chris, you know this better than I do, Indonesia is not even on the map, or if it is on the map, the awareness of it as a Muslim majority country, the largest Muslim nation on the planet, is just not there in people's heads. And as Sam said, Americans have been sort of trained to think of Muslim equals Arab nations. I'm not sure how many Americans recognize that India has a vast Muslim population, for example. So it's just good to kind of put in those footnotes, because I think it goes with the stereotypes as well.
Yeah.
Like 1 billion Muslims on the planet and more and counting.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge diaspora. It's a huge diaspora all over the world, as of course Samina knows. So back to you, Samina.
So with that, what I'm going to do, and thank you for those answers and for those insights, because that is, on the one hand, it's exactly what I've been hearing. I've been doing this work now, as you know, since 2004, 2005. So it's exactly, those are the same answers I've been getting for that many years, for 15 plus years. And that's really sad that even this many years after 9/11 and this many years later, we're still in that place where we still don't have a better idea of what it really means to have a diversity of voices of Muslims. And so let me just show you. I'm going to screen share. And I just want to go over and show you the exhibition that I did. This is the exhibition that I curated. And it's called Muslima. And you can see that every time you refresh it, different things come out. This went live in 2016. And it's still referred back to, but I still get people all over the world who haven't seen anything like it. And in fact, I was approached to help with the Dubai World Expo that was supposed to launch October 2020, because they're also interested in doing an exhibition on women around the world, not entirely focused on Muslim women, but they had asked me to help with the Muslim women aspect of it. So it's truly an exhibition that is revolutionary and groundbreaking in many ways, because what we see too often is that others talk about Muslim women, and the people who most often talk about Muslim women aren't women, and they're not Muslim. And so it was a time to give back the mic. So what Chris was saying earlier about the Philippines, the three answers that I get when I ask people, what's the first image that comes to your mind when you think about a Muslim woman, is she's veiled, she's Arab, and she's a victim. And I just wanted to show this. So as you can see, as Chris was saying, Indonesia, this is the largest population of Muslims in the world. After that, you have India, which is where I'm from. And, you know, India's population growth is really accelerating, and they're saying that Muslims in India are soon going to surpass Indonesia. And then Bangladesh. And as you can see, even if you put together, you know, I mean, Morocco is at 16 million, Algeria is at 17, Egypt is at, you know, close to 40. So when you're thinking about Muslims in the Middle East, they're really a minority. And yet that's what we consider. So one of the things that we did is we partnered with Misrepresentation, which is an organization that is local. It is, I think it was Jennifer Newsom, Gavin Newsom's wife, who created Misrepresentation, and it became famous because they would critique all of the commercials during Super Bowl and talk about how women were being sexualized. Well, it shows here that media has been a large culprit. So only 24% of news subjects in the world, people in the news, are female. And that's across the board. I don't just mean Muslims. Only 2 to 14% actually challenge gender stereotypes. So women in film and television are really not portrayed in leadership roles, and they're less likely than male characters to achieve their goals. And this is now too, despite how things are changing. Women are over-sexualized in all forms of media. I think we would all agree on that. The intersection of women and Muslim women, however, makes it so that Muslim women, on the one hand, can be sexualized. The veil is a fetish for some. And so on the one hand, Muslim women can be overly sexualized. And on the other hand, Muslim women are represented as very negatively, meaning, as you can see in one study in the UK, found that 91% of articles, 91% portrayed Muslims in a negative way. So if you have to ask yourself, why do I believe these things that I do about Muslim women? Well, here's your answer. So the 3 common appearances, portrayals of Muslim women, as I said, is that Muslim women are all covered, they're all victim, and Muslim women around the world are all the same. So being the same, as you can imagine, anyone in here knows that's how stereotypes are formed. Historically, that's how stereotypes have always been formed, is you go into a country, you get rid of all of the diversity that exists within a community, you say that they're all the same thing. Colonization worked this way when they went into places like Africa and India. Everyone is the same and they're all inferior, we're better, we have a richer culture, we're more progressive, we're modern. So when you start saying that all Muslims and all Muslim women are exactly the same, it's easy to override and portray, to basically put onto them everything we want to put onto them, which is that they're all Arab, they're all victims, and they're all veiled. So one of the things that we wanted to do, and I've been doing for a very long time, is giving back the mic to Muslim women and saying, well, let's talk about the rich heritage that exists within the Muslim community. Scott, did you want me to keep going, or should I pause and take any questions?
Well, I'll leave that up to you, and maybe up to the students. Chris and Jubin kind of monitor the chat room as well, so I'll kind of leave it up to them as well. I think you can keep going, unless Sir Jubin has a question that they want to insert for us here.
There's nothing so far we see in the chat right now.
Okay, great. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to begin the presentation because Muslima has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of voices. So it's not possible, obviously, to go through all of them. But one of the few things that I did one of the themes that I wanted to pick up on is the diversity. When we speak about Muslim women, one of the things that we don't often speak about are Black Americans who are Muslim and have been Muslims for, generations in this country. And so their voice is one of the voices that gets really silenced through all of this. So this is a spoken word poem by Taslim And I'm gonna just play it so that you can hear for yourself the power of her words.
I'm from a place where innocence is kept. Elders wept for souls of those who slept, who crept for more excellence and spirit left. Yet hopes hopped all around 95th Street where brief moments of wisdom leap. The true love of Allah to be chosen.
We were under Sarata Mustaqim, royalty, dynamic and serene. Worship Allah in a state of peace and divine reality. Spiritual from all nations, living according to divine laws. We knew how to be role models for generations to be spiritual warriors that could carry unto eternity.
La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. I am a Moor, coming to restore your birthright from all portals and shores. Feel like you got a heart transplant when I focus my tent. Blissful blessings that grant my interest to all the planets. I am Pluto, Venus, Mars, Uranus, Saturn, and firm like igneous granted. I am Buddhist, Nam-myo, Renge-kyo. My soul vibrate high, so I'm not for sale. I am Sufi, Zikr Allahu, automatic implanted in my cell. Even a blind man can read my chi without braille. I am quite baptized in herbal truth, organically medicated, decode the Bible from the root. I am Om, that's my home, first breath. I am Muslim, Jewish, Christian, ancient magician. I am black, red, white, yellow, and brown. I am.
I love that because she is doing exactly what I'm talking about, and she's absolutely refusing to fit into anyone's stereotype, and she's embracing so many different, you know, intersections of her identity. And she's saying, you know, I'm all of these things, and I'm not one of them at all. Another voice that gets, I think the other thing that happens when we think about Muslim women in just these very stereotypical and rigid ways is we don't actually see them as American. We see them as the other. And so one of the photographers in here is an American Muslim woman named Sadaf Sayed. You'll hear me talking about a lot of these women in first person because, you know, I've gotten to know them. What she does is she just took these photographs of American Muslim women who are just doing their normal everyday things just to prove, and just this simple act of just showing how these women are both Muslim and American was, you know, it's kind of shocking to a lot of people because you don't think, for instance, of a Muslim woman who is in the United States Army. So she just took these images, and I'm just going to let the images speak for themselves. So she's of Italian and German descent, but she happens to be Muslim. A semi-truck driver from Pakistan. She's both Palestinian and Dutch, and she's a soccer player. This is a homecoming queen, actually. And it goes back, but yeah. In Illinois, this woman was covered and she's still the homecoming queen. Same thing, we don't hear when we talk about Muslims being in, you know, largely being Arab, we don't hear about the Christian Arabs and the Jewish Arabs, and who happen to also veil because that's just part of their culture. But we always think it's only Muslim women who veil. And so we wanted to include, I wanted to include these voices too. So Helen is Arab and she grew up in Lebanon, and her family, they're covers, but they're Christian. So she is an artist who wanted to confront those stereotypes. So she's showing these women with the abaya driving and everything. But again, for her, because she's not Muslim, these women that she's painting are also not Muslim. It's just that we just automatically assume they are.
I think one of the things is really forgotten is that one of the fastest growing religions in Europe is Islam,
Mhm.
and that some countries are actually have more Muslims in Europe than identify as Muslim than Christian.
Oh, interesting. Do you happen to know which countries?
I don't remember, but I could tell you that France, whenever I go back, I definitely see and hear about more mosques.
Mm-hmm.
And then certainly in the lower income neighborhoods, and they're multi-ethnic mosques. They're not just the Pakistanis or the Indian or Arab, but also a lot of North Africans from from Algeria, and also a lot of just poor white are turning to Islam. In France, I could tell you that, but
I mean, France, it's for sure that it's growing, but I think like most of the people, even living in the suburbs, like I've lived there at some point, and I know that like Christians are still a majority, but yeah, I know it's growing, but for sure it's not like the majority. When you look at it, even in the campaign and everything, like it's
yeah,
not that.
it's not the majority for sure, but it's definitely growing at a greater rate that they identify. It's a greater rate that they're
Oh yeah, that's for
identifying.
sure. Even though they don't like it,
Right. I mean, look
which
at I
I
mean
think
look
is
at the
stupid.
I mean look at their national team, national soccer team. 70% of the players were Muslim.
Oh, that
Um,
I know.
yeah, I think 60
That
or
we know.
70%. And I think like 80% or 70% were children of immigrants. So, but I do think that,
Yeah.
but you're seeing a lot of non-typical, and I'm saying like more whites, and certainly in France, in the banlieues. Well, the suburbs in Europe are considered quote unquote ghettos, what we call.
Mhm.
So, so in the suburbs where there's a lot of like lower income, socioeconomically challenged, um,
Actually, like the suburbs are not the place where the income is the lowest. It's mostly people in the countryside, and over there they're like, yeah, it's a lot of conservative.
Okay, and that's actually an excellent snapshot from France. And I want to make sure that we can move on a little bit. Next, what did you want to what did you want to show us next from this excellent exhibition? And
So,
I want to also mention, I think my students already know this, but anyone can view the Muslima exhibition online 24/7 from anywhere in the world at any time. And there's an astounding richness of art there. And as Samina made clear, every single time you log into Muslima, you get a different selection of artists. So it's not in any way a static site. It's extremely dynamic. And really, I mean, I could build a 12-week class around that website so easily. I think the richness of it is absolutely inexhaustible. Samina, do you know how many artists you've featured on Muslima at this point, roughly?
it's in the hundreds.
That's what I was thinking. It must be in the hundreds.
It's in
Right?
the hundreds, and we had partnered with the Women's Museum in Denmark, the Women's Museum, I'm sorry, the Ayala Museum in the Philippines, and the Sharjah Museum in the United Arab Emirates. So we had partner museums around the world that helped, that I reached out to when I was curating this. I wanted to also just quickly go over these photographs that are, because we're seeing such, you know, the unfortunate, well, we know what's happening in China where Muslims are being targeted. Chinese Muslims have been living in China for centuries, and now they're being asked not to express themselves. The mosques are being torn down, Muslims are being tortured and put into prisons. And so this series of photographs just shows you, because again, we don't often think about Muslims in China and how long they've been there, and the richness of their own heritage. And one of the things that your student was saying earlier about France and about how mosques were including, Muslims from different backgrounds is really important, because what happens generally is, because, as I was saying, Muslims are so different from one another, that Chinese Muslims in the US might have their own mosques. Black American Muslims will have their own mosques. Indians and Pakistanis will have their own mosques. Different Arabs, Muslims have their own mosque. And it's, I remember when I was growing up, I'm from India, and my mom wore a sari to the mosque. And in a sari, you can see a midriff and you can see her back. And that day, we had a mosque where it was largely Indians and Pakistanis. And one day while we were praying, a woman came in, and I think she was Palestinian American, and she was a Muslim, and she was wearing a skirt. And my mom and her got into it, because she came up to my mom and immediately said, "You can't pray with your whole midriff showing. You've got to be entirely covered." And my mom looked at her and was like, "You can't pray with your legs showing. You've got to be entirely covered." So, it's a very cultural thing. And this is what this shows, is how uniquely cultural this experience of being Chinese American is. Chris?
So it looks like Jamie has a question.
Absolutely.
Hi, Samina. Thank you for joining us. So my question concerns Black nationalists, and I was just really moved by the video you showed us, and I started to think about other African Americans I've met that are Muslim, and how, due to the rising of just within segregation, and how we saw Malcolm X, he was seen as the aggressor between him and Martin Luther King. So it just makes me think about how religion has influenced Black people in America, and how Muslim or Islam is usually seen as an more aggressive way to approaching other people. So I wanted to know more about what you thought about the term Black nationalist, especially since Judaism, Islam, and Christianity are all Abrahamic faiths. So why is it that Islam is seen as the more aggressive faith?
I mean, I think that most recently, obviously, we have a lot of the terrorism that feeds into that stereotype. But it is an unfortunate, and I do actually have Malcolm X's daughter in the exhibition, and I interviewed her, and she's doing remarkable work. Laila Ali, Muhammad Ali's daughter, is also in here, and she's doing remarkable work around the US. And one of the things that, talking to Malcolm X's daughter, it is tragic to hear about how even after her father came out, he went to Mecca and he did Hajj, and he said, what I've been thinking about Islam and how I thought Islam was really about, suppressing the white man and getting Black power. It's not true. It's really just about equality. And I went to Mecca and I saw people of all races and all backgrounds. And he came back with a very different view of Islam. And he changed. And it's exactly what happens. Once you change and once you become a more moderate voice, a voice of tolerance, a voice of unity, he had people within his own community who went up against him, and then people outside of that community who went up against him.
Right.
And it's because he came back with the message that really riled people up, and they didn't suddenly want to accept that Malcolm X was here and he was peaceful, and as peaceful maybe as Malcolm X, who was, you know, a Christian preacher who was saying nonviolence. What do you think, Jamie? I would love to hear your thoughts.
I feel like I try so hard not to blame like the perception that most like of the world has on the media, because I feel like it's not always entirely that. I feel like a lot of values that are, you know, just we're raised to have here is not always to like always accept your neighbor, even though like that's like what we're kind of supposed to do. And, you know, America is like, you know, a pool of different races and backgrounds. I feel like there's a lot of places where it's still a process for a lot of people. So I feel like with the media coming in, it didn't have that in mind. It didn't have the values to bring us closer together in mind. And I feel like also too, like, because we literally have Christianity embedded in our constitution, like most people in this country are always gonna just be like, this is what's right. Or if we were to have, you know, the president focusing on that faith in general, like a lot of people would be moved by that for some reason. And I just think it's not really modern and fair anymore to really just go back to that, because there's so many other faiths here and the people that don't have, you know, faith at all. So
Exactly. I completely agree with you.
Excuse me, can I answer a question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, hi, my name is Winner.
Hi.
So to answer your question, I, for one, I'm a Muslim. So if I can kind of relate to what you asked, how Muslims are portrayed here in America. One, it's simply because of the media or the Hollywood movies you see. They will show an image of Muslims that who we are not are. I mean, it's painful and sad to see people, you know, war movies only affect in places like Syria, like in places like in the Middle East. I can tell you, we as Muslims, we are people who like peace. We preach peace in the mosque. The Quran teaches us to be peaceful. But the way people portray the Islamic religion is different. So that actually gives people the wrong message about Islam. But then what I would say is it's better, you know, sometimes to sort out the message or the type of contents we see, because if you know the media, the one purpose of the media is to distract people or have its main focus on a certain topic or on a certain issue. So to me, I would think basically what we would do is sort out what we hear or listen or what we see. That's it.
And I think that's exactly, here's Ilyasa Shabaz's interview that I did. She's Malcolm X's daughter. And there she is with her father. It's a wonderful interview, and what she's doing. She wrote this book called Growing Up, a memoir. And so, again, it's really, what this exhibition does is it really does allow Muslims to speak from their own perspective about what it means, and it really highlights the diversity that exists within the Muslim community. And the lens I gave it to women, because most often, unfortunately, women, you know, we see that in the West, which is why I began with that misperception infographic that we did, because even, you know, women around the world, whether they're Muslim or not, have to face a lot of stereotypes in the media. And then on top of that, you know, I just wanted to show what those specific stereotypes are for Muslim women. One of the things that I don't do, however, is I don't say, hey, this is a problem that Muslims are facing because of everything that's happening in the West. I don't blame it entirely on the West. What I do want to show is that there are problems that exist within the Muslim communities around the world. And we need, you know, Muslims do need to start addressing those. One of the things is that just as the Western media tries to homogenize the image of the Muslim woman, saying that she's a victim, she's veiled, she's submissive, and ironically at the same time, she is, you know, a terrorist. one of the things that's happening in different parts of the world because of the rise of Muslim jihadists and this extremist form of Islam that's spreading through Yemen, spreading from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, from these parts of the world, that singular narrative about what Muslim women can do is also spreading from within these very fundamentalist communities of Muslims. So Bushra is a world-renowned photographer, and this is her right here. And she's from Yemen, and she lives in Yemen, and this is her daughter, and this is her daughter's doll. And one of the things she really did in this photo series, it's called the Hijab series, is she showed what it was like to be a Muslim in Yemen. So as you can see here, she's in a yellow headscarf. Her daughter is not covered. But as fundamentalism started spreading through Yemen, she shows how her Yemeni culture was completely destroyed and taken over by fundamentalism. So slowly, you know, again, women's bodies bear the impact a lot of times of what's happening in culture. You can even see that in the US with, you know, I think next week, abortion rights are going up in front of the Supreme Court. So, you know, these are things that we women have to bear. As you can see, as conservatism spreads through Yemen, she's showing what happens to the woman's body. So women there were asked to wear darker and darker veils. The color is being taken off. Her daughter, who never had to cover before, is being asked to cover. And as an ironic thing, you know, Bushra as an artist is showing that even the doll is covered. You know, that's just her personal statement on it. And then of course, this is now the image that we're seeing of Muslim women globally, unfortunately, because of the rise of fundamentalism. And here again is the image that many of us see. Again, she's being, you know, facetious by adding it to the doll, but it's just to maintain her point. And even the background now is black. And of course, now the hands have gloves. The eyes are also covered behind the veil. And then women disappear. I mean, and that's basically the message that she's getting from fundamentalists, is that women should just disappear. They should be voiceless. She also did this thing where she took Barbie, which has historically been the American dream, the American stereotype of the perfect Muslim woman. And she put that iconic image with the Muslim iconic image, which is the veil, and these very sort of Barbie and Ken meeting with the veil. Again, very facetious, very humorous. These aren't meant to be serious, but they are serious commentaries on both American and Muslim culture, and how one symbol, the symbol of the Barbie or the symbol of the veil, can suddenly be the symbol of all women. The scarf, of course, is something that is really deeply problematic. And because Muslim women are often portrayed with the scarf, Muslim women artists deal with the scarf a lot in their work, and they deal with it from their own perspective. So I wanted to show you a few films, very short films, of women who deal with it. This is by Mehnaz, and as you can see from Mehnaz's image here, she is a woman who covers, and she's from Afghanistan. So she's going to, this is a really interesting video where she is on a college campus, and I think this is something all of you will identify with, because the students she interviews are just like you.
What's the first thing comes to your mind when you see a hijabi girl, a girl who's wearing a scarf?
I don't have a problem with headscarves. I think, you know, it could be a personal statement, but like the full body thing, I don't know. I mean, should it be made illegal? No, but I can understand why it would be, not just simply for religious reasons. But yeah, there is something that bothers me about, you know, people just totally covering themselves. I mean, if it's a personal choice, that's great. But I don't want to lie to you and say it doesn't make me nervous. I mean, the person under is probably a perfectly decent person, you know? It'd be wrong to make that sort of instantaneous association. That's not right.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is kind of a cultural tradition that I'm not necessarily fully familiar with.
I feel like sort of, I don't know, the first thing I think of is like a pride in culture.
First in my mind, I think of tradition. I think of Islamic tradition. I think of the controversy, particularly in Europe right now, surrounding that tradition.
I don't really think about, you know, whether she's making a political statement or anything like that. It's more just, oh, she must be Muslim.
Islam. Egypt.
Foods. Like
I think they're from a very conservative culture. I guess I would think of religious traditions and commitments.
What do you relate hijab to?
I'll be lying to you if I didn't say it was related to Islam. With terrorism, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it can be seen as oppression, I guess, but I don't immediately make that assumption, no.
Diversity, I would say.
Didn't you relate it to fashion?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I never thought of that for sure. Yeah.
Don't you think people may wear it for fashion?
I think people may wear it for fashion sometimes.
Do you want to try on our hijabs?
Oh, sure. Like this one.
You know how to wear?
No, I don't. No, I don't. And like this?
Yeah. And then?
Oh, so it's like a babushka, pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So how does it feel?
Fit?
How does it feel?
Feel.
How do you feel?
I'm neutral. I mean, I personally don't care for, you know, the slightly restricted vision and the feeling of fabric all around my face, honestly. But like, if you're used to it, then that's fine.
Would you like to join our stuff?
Sure. So take one. We're good also.
How does it feel?
It's different, certainly. It's cool.
I like it.
I like it.
It seemed like I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't-
Seeing your hair makes that much difference.
I usually hide my hair anyways because my hair doesn't look great a lot of the time.
It's like as if you had your hair like up or something.
Yeah.
I like it. It's not uncomfortable. Yeah. Nice.
I can't even feel it.
I think I should be going for a convertible ride.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's just really different. It's kind of hot on a day like today.
Right, okay.
I have done this, but it was because it was like pouring, like snowing really hard or something. The only occasion in which I've ever like consciously used a scarf to cover my head was when I was protecting myself from something.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't. I don't think I would do it as a fashion statement personally, but it's interesting to know that people do.
Yeah. The scarf tied this way, the triangle, I feel like it's very like 1950s in a convertible, like protecting your hairdo from the wind.
Like a babushka.
Yeah.
I think a babushka.
Well, that's funny because you look more like babushka style. You look more like 50s convertible.
It's all right. Should I take it off now?
How does your friend look like?
Yeah, she looks pretty. I would never normally expect to see her that way. So like, if I had seen her that way, like just when I saw her in the morning, or you know, just randomly, I probably would have been a little surprised at first. I asked, "Oh, what are you doing? Why are you wearing that today?" Or what, you know, what are you doing?
What I like about that is not only is it just college students, but then they start to really say, oh my God, it's like a babushka. Oh, it's like 1950s Katharine Hepburn. It's like this, it's like that. And then suddenly it takes away from that sense that we have that it's this terrible thing that, you know, women, only Muslim women do. This is it's probably one of my favorite videos in the whole exhibition. It is made by a Canadian Muslim named Hala. And what Hala does here is she really pits, remember how in Bushra's series there was the iconic symbol of the American woman, which is the Barbie doll, versus the iconic symbol of the Muslim woman, which is the veil. And here what Hala does is she takes the two extremes, because if you ask a certain segment of the population what they think about the American woman, they'll say the American woman, oh, well, she's just kind of, you know, she's always dressed in a certain way. She's kind of slutty, she's, you know. And so what she does is she takes these two very opposite images and she puts them together on a metro in Canada.
Prochaine station, Place des Arts.
What I love about this is that what she does is she shows you what each is imagining of the other. So the woman who's fully covered is imagining the other, you know, with the stripper pole, and the woman with this who's not covered is imagining the Muslim woman, you know, being even more covered by her, you know, the Muslim man who, you know, suddenly appears from behind and covers even her eyes. So she's playing on those stereotypes. But I think more importantly, what she does at the end when she has the man in the metro and he is fantasizing about these two women, I think the most important point that she's getting across is that whether you're veiled or not veiled, it's always about the male gaze. You know, it's not about the woman herself and what she's wearing. It's all about, you know, those in power telling women what to wear and why to wear those things and why it's important for women to look and be who they are. So it takes the power away from the woman. I wanted to pause. Is there, before I finish, I have two very short films that I wanted to finish with, but if there's any questions or if anything, I can definitely pause. So one of the things that I want to end with today is you know, in my work, I've done a lot of things. I've, you know, presented. Chris, did you have something to say?
There's like a few questions, like 3 or 4 questions that are in the chat. Just letting you know.
Yeah,
if you want to like take that in.
Why don't you show me, since my screen right now is has the Muslima up.
Yeah, or just read them out, Chris. That would be fine.
Okay. So Afe, she has a question. Afe, are you still here?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Cool.
Okay, so it goes back. Wait, yeah, there we go. It goes back from the very beginning when you told us about your parents and how they view your career as a writer. And I was wondering, because you told us about the story in the car, and when your mom was training like a hobby, did your parents end up like seeing it as a job, an actual job? And are they proud of you for what you've accomplished so far?
That's a good question, and unfortunately, no. Both of my brothers went on and did what my parents wanted. My younger brother is a surgeon, and my older brother is an investment banker, and they're both very successful. And so they're doing exactly what every immigrant parent wishes their child would be doing. And no, so I'm like the black sheep in the house, and it doesn't matter to them that actually, they don't even like the topics that I talk about. They feel like religion is a very private thing. And so they don't understand why I even have to talk about it. And I say, well, I'm not really trying to talk about it. What I'm really trying to do is get, you know, these voices out there and to dispel the stereotypes and to create bridges. But they don't think that it's my role to be a bridge builder.
Oh, that makes sense. Because I think that you're like when I saw your TED Talk and when I watched it, I felt it was so inspiring just to see how this society, which is so patriarchal, sees Muslim women and women in general. And I don't know. I was just wondering that because it's really important topics that you actually talk about.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever get them on board.
I hope you will.
Chris, are there any other questions?
Yeah, there's one from Disha. Disha, are you still here?
Yeah, hey Samina, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you.
I remember you saying that India is the second largest country that houses Muslims, and with the recent citizenship law that was passed by Modi, that seems to target Indian Muslims. What are your thoughts about that, and how does that speak to the rise of like anti-Muslim sentiment in literally the second largest country that houses Muslims?
Well, I don't think it's by any coincidence that the population of Muslims is rising in India, and it's soon going to be the country where, you know, the majority of Muslims in the world exist and live. And what is happening there at the governmental level to suppress Muslims. I think that it is, you know, as we see in the US when we have immigration, I think people feel threatened. And I think that that is what's happening. I also don't, you know, I think that my son was in India for the past 6 to 7 months. And he was there actually with the Department of Justice. So he was there at a different level. And he saw the level of intolerance that's spreading through India. And it's concerning. It's really concerning, especially because India is my home. My parents still have a home there. I've got relatives there, and it's unsafe, you know. And so on the one hand, I am a minority in India and unwelcome, even though it's my birth country. And on the other hand, in the US, which is my adopted country, I'm also an immigrant and also a Muslim woman. And, you know, so where do you go when you're someone like me? You know, and both of these places I consider to be my home, but in both of those places, you know, they kind of want me out. So it's that tension that my work comes from.
Thank you.
Ruhana has a question. Ruhana, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here. Hi, so nice to talk to you. So my question was, how can we continue to shed light on other minorities who are often disregarded in society? And that like goes to show like how can we work towards like eradicating stereotypes? Because as you said, there's a lot to do with like intersectionality, and there's more to what people see like when they look at somebody.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, partnering with organizations, Scott had brought that, Scott, there's a Define American chapter at Foothill, isn't there?
Yes, and Jose Antonio Vargas was a guest several times on campus. He's the founder of a movement called Define America and has written many books about the question of citizenship and who quote unquote, air quotes, gets to be an American, hence the title Define American.
It's a really, really fabulous organization that uses personal stories to do, well, it kind of is exactly what I'm doing. He uses personal stories to really expand the concept of what it means to be American. And it includes not just, you know, when I was there last year at Foothill and I spoke with him, I was actually so moved by what he was doing and so moved by his organization that my son is a college student at Carleton College, which is a small private liberal arts college in the Midwest. And I told my son to start a local chapter at his college, which he did do. And what it does is they bring together, kind of like what the Slima did at the beginning with the spoken word. They bring together different communities and they build bridges by just speaking about who they are and their own backgrounds and the intersection of their identities. And they find commonalities where they didn't think they existed. You know, just like the wearing the scarf, when suddenly they're like, oh, it's a babushka. Oh, it's like Audrey Hepburn. Oh, it's like this, you know, like different places where you're like, oh, I didn't think of this, but of course, you know. So I think the reason I like art, I'll tell you, I was a year or two ago, I was asked to present my work at the Nobel Women's Initiative. The Nobel's Women Initiative was created by 6 Nobel Peace Prize winners who are women. And every 2 years, they have a conference where they bring together women around the world who are doing things to build peace in their communities. And they had invited me to come and present about my work. And all 6 women Nobel Peace Prize winners are there because they want to help you to expand your message. And one of the things, I was one of the only women there who does peace advocacy through art. And it was, the reason I do it is because I think that we can go to lectures and we can go and we can listen to people on CNN and all of this, and we can differ with them, but we go and we hardly ever leave with our heads and our minds changed in any way. I should say our minds and our hearts changed in any way. But when we go and we see art, whether we go into a museum or an online museum like this, when we read a book, when we go to a movie, we go expecting to be moved on some level. We enter that space expecting a transformation, and we want that. So our guard is down, we go in and we meet the artist where the artist lives. And that's why I think art is so important in peace advocacy work, because when people come to this exhibition, or when people read my novel, or when people come and see me speak and they're hearing just stories, or they're seeing people's artwork, they want to be moved, and they are moved, and they go away with that impression, and they're not closed down. And I think that's why it's so important.
All right, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Saba has a question. Saba, are you here?
Hi.
Oh, cool.
I actually wanted to wish you a Ramadan Mubarak first.
Oh, happy Ramadan to you.
So I wanted to ask if you believe that we as Muslim women have a responsibility to be representatives of our faith, because the stereotypes are so negative that sometimes I feel the pressure to be a representative for my faith, especially as a Muslim woman. So do you think that this is our responsibility, or it's our duty to do something like that?
No, I don't. I think that, this question was asked a lot right after 9/11, and right after, even the Boston Marathon shooting and the massacre. I mean, it's just, it's asked of Muslims a lot that we as Muslims step up and we start advocating and, showing people that we're here, we're peaceful, we do, we're not these terrorists. And it becomes a burden, like I said, Islam, spirituality, no matter what religion you are, is an internal thing. It's between you and God. And what's happened because of all these stereotypes and because of the Islamophobia that's spreading is that our very intimate relationship with God has taken on a national public stage. And for those who don't want to talk about it and who want to just continue to live in, the privacy of their faith and have a lived experience of Islam, I say all the power to you. And then for those who do want to create change and who do want to step up like I have, you can do it, Sabah, but there's just so much, you're going to get attacked. Your faith is going to be questioned even by fellow Muslims, no matter what intention you come with, saying, hey, I'm trying to build peace. This is the work that I'm doing, and I'm talking about a very complicated thing here. People are going to say, I get the strangest things. I get people on Twitter who say, well, do you even pray? Do you even fast for Ramadan? And I'm thinking, what does that even have to do with it? I'm trying to build bridges here, and I'm trying to create peace where there's clearly a rise in Islamophobia. So I think if anyone does put themselves out into this space, it hasn't changed. The kind of backlash that someone like Malcolm X experienced way back then, it still exists. And so if you can go out there and you can say, yeah, I'm ready to face this backlash, and I'm ready to be, hit from all sides, even from people who I am trying to, talk about, then all the power to you. But I think that's why it's also important to align yourself with organizations, you know, like the Nobel Women's Initiative or like Global Fund, or, you know, like these organizations where you can, where your voice is amplified and has more power.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a great point you made about the internal conflict, because sometimes I feel that's even worse than the external conflict when it comes to representing our faith.
Yeah, I mean, have you felt it yourself?
At points, because I actually used to live in a Muslim majority country before I moved here, and I never was conscious of the fact that I'm a Muslim woman until I came here and I had to justify myself to others. So yeah, it's a complex experience.
It is complex. I remember after my novel came out, one of the most popular questions I would get from the audience is, and they would ask this with full sincerity, you know, they would come up to me and say, you are educated and you live in America, so why do you choose to be Muslim? And I was, you know, as though being educated and America just simply means, oh, I'm just going to give up my faith. You know, like it doesn't, like you can't be both. And that's why I'm always out there saying, no, I'm both. And there's, you know, and I'm more than that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
If I may, I can completely relate to what you're saying, because I used to study at a British private school in the UK, Sea of London. So I was Muslim, I was African, and I was new. So I was this type of kid who knew everything, who just spoke out what was on my mind, because that's how I was raised. So people would ask me, hey, you're Muslim. Yeah, it's strange. You don't look like Muslim. And I ask myself, how are Muslims supposed to look like? So it is what it is. But then sometimes you just have to, you know, ignore the bias, ignore the homophobia, and, you know, just be real to yourself and, you know, just brush it off. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and even after my TED Talk, because the TED Talk went viral and it's got more than 6 million views. And, you know, I get a lot of people who come to me and they're, you know, for whatever reason, they're like, well, you're against the scarf. And I'm like, there's not one sentence in my entire TED Talk where I said that I personally am against the scarf. And in fact, my novel ends with the main character putting on the scarf as a symbol of her own freedom. But it is an individual thing. You know, I believe that if you are educated and I don't mean just in the Western sense, I mean, if you're educated in your faith, whether your faith is, you know, Judaism or Christianity or Islam, if you are educated in who you are and what you believe, and you make your choices based on what you are educated in, then it is an act of empowerment. But if you make your choices based on ignorance or because culture is telling you or laws are telling you to do certain things, then it is a disempowered decision that you're doing. So women who just put on the veil because they just believe that that is what it means to be Muslim, because someone has told them that that's it, and they haven't read the Quran and they don't know, then I don't think that's an empowered choice. Same with not wearing the veil. You have to know what it says. I'm going to end. I wanted to show this because one of the questions that I asked at the very beginning was, what is the first image that comes to your mind when you think about a Muslim woman? And in this short video, I was a judge. This is an organization. This is not a Muslima. This is an organization called Women's Voices Now. And they have films from around the world by female filmmakers. It's a great, great website to go to. You can see movies of all lengths from, you know, women filmmakers from around the world and from all backgrounds. But one of these is by Lina Khan. And what she does is she asks the opposite. She goes to Muslims and she says, what is the one thing you wish other people knew about you as a Muslim? And here's their answer.
I wanna live in a land called paradise. I wanna go to the valley of the king. I wanna live in a land called paradise. Wanna see the birds fly, and I wanna hear the angels sing the praises of my Lord so far above. As I move poetically with struggle, I fall in love. I look to the left, I look to the right, and all I gaze upon reveals the source of flowers, rainbows, and the dew at dawn. Some see before, and some see in, and some see after. I let my sight pierce the chains and see the master. I wanna live in a land called paradise. I wanna go to the valley of the king. I wanna live in a land called paradise. Wanna see the birds fly, and I wanna hear the angels sing. So many times in my life I ask myself the question, what got me, brought me into all this mess I'm swimming in? What pain is not in me, the harm in the pool of bliss? So slap me with your hand or kiss me with your softest kiss. Tell me that you love me or that you don't like me now. Tell me you invite me or that you don't want me around. I won't cry over a world that can't change my life. I'll put my money on what lies ahead in paradise. I wanna live in a land called paradise. I wanna go to the valley of the king. I wanna live in a land called paradise. Wanna see the birds fly, I wanna hear the angels sing. I try to do right, I love my wife and trade and pray and talk. I can be anywhere, do anything, and I'm mindful of God. I'm pleased and good and happy and harmony. Now I realize that I already live in a land called paradise. I wanna live in a land called paradise. I wanna go to the valley of the king. I wanna live in a land called paradise. Wanna see the birds fly, I wanna hear the angels. I wanna live in a land called paradise. I wanna go to the valley of the king. I wanna live in a land called paradise. Wanna see the birds fly, and I wanna hear the angels sing. Wanna hear the angels sing. Oh, oh.
Again, I'm just gonna let, I'm not gonna say anything because I think it speaks for itself. This is the last thing I'm gonna show you. It's one of the most moving films that I've seen. And when I judge this, you know, when I have been a judge in the past for Women's Voices Now, the first time I saw this, I actually had tears in my eyes because it's that powerful. It's about the hate crime victims among, you know, American Muslims in Chicago. But the great thing about this is it's a collaborative project. So it answers the question I think that Sabah or one of the others had in class, you know, how do you get together with other communities? And one of the communities, of course, is the Japanese American community. Define American is another community, but the Japanese Americans, because of the incarceration camps, have been one of the most, have stood in solidarity the most with American Muslims. I'm again just gonna let this, because this is such a powerful film about hate crime that I just want it to stand on its own.
Awoke to signs, terrorists sprayed in red paint across their family's driveway. Terrorist on board, written on their white car. Awoke to find freeway sign says kill all Arabs. Elevator sign says kill all towel heads. A Pakistani living in LA awoke to find his car scratched across the right side with words nuke 'em. Awoke to find 300 march on a mosque in Bridgeview, Illinois. 300 American flags shout, USA, USA. Mosque awoke to find a 19-year-old shouting, I'm proud to be American. I hate Arabs, and I always have. Firebomb toss. Taxi driver pulled out and beaten. Vandals in Collingswood, New Jersey attacked 2 Indian-owned businesses. Vandals spray painted, leave town. Awoke to find a South Asian American Sikh chased by a group of 4 men yelling, terrorist. Sikh mistaken for Muslim. Backup. Sikh man 69 shot, body found in a canal. He had a turban on. Turban mistaken for Muslim. A vehicle of white males followed and harassed a 21-year-old female. Attackers yelled, go back to your own country. The attacker's car pinned her against another vehicle, then they backed up and ran over her again. Kimberly, a 21-year-old backup, a 21-year-old full-blood Creek backup, full-blood Creek Native American mistaken for Muslim. Woke to find a Pakistani native beaten by 3 men. Backup. Egyptian American 48 killed point blank. Backup. Sikh men 49 shot. Shooter shouted, I stand for America all the way. Backup. A man pushing a baby stroller walked by a mosque. He stopped and started yelling, you Islamic mosquitoes should be killed. Mosquito mistaken for Muslim. Awoke to find 2 women speaking Spanish in a doctor's office. Another woman yells, you foreigners caused all this trouble. Spanish speaker beaten. Spanish mistaken for Muslim. Awoke to be mistaken. A woman wearing Muslim clothing was shopping. A Caucasian woman began attacking her and shouts, America is only for white people. Back up. America mistaken for white people. Armed man sets fire to a Seattle mosque. 300 march on a mosque in Bridgeview, Illinois. In Texas, attack. Muslim student in Arizona State University, attack. Afghan restaurant in Fremont, attack. 2 suspects wrote die on a Persian club. A gasoline bomb is thrown through the window of a Sikh family's home, hitting a 3-year-old in the head. 2 women at a bagel store attacked for wearing Quranic charm around her neck. Attacker lunges and yells, look what you people have done to my people. No one in the store tried to help. 2 women awoke to find an explosion from a cherry bomb outside the Islamic Center of San Diego. San Diego mistaken for Muslim. Look what you people have done to my people. 300 march on a mosque in Bridgeview, Illinois. No one tried to help. Sign says kill all Arabs. Sign says kill all towel heads. Towels mistaken for Muslim. No one tried to help. Vandals attacked. No one tried to help. He had a turban on. No one tried to help. Sign says look what you people have done. Flags wave in an Afghan restaurant. 300 march against Spanish spoken at a doctor's office. Spanish mistaken for Muslim. 300 march on 2 women at a bagel store. Bagels mistaken for Muslim. 300 wave cherry bombs. March on 300 Sikhs hitting a 3-year-old in the head. Look what you people have done.
So I know it's powerful. And what I love about that is it shows you, you know, I mean, you could take the word Muslim out of there and put in any community. You know, it could be the Black community, it could be immigrants now, it could be Mexicans who are being told that they're killers. I mean, it's crazy. Just take out the word Muslim and insert your own community, and that video could be about you. It could be about any one of us, you know, and that's the power. It's the power of art. So that concludes what I have to say. I would love to hear your impressions. You don't even have to have a question. I would just love to hear what you guys are thinking and where you're at with all this. It doesn't even have to be about Muslims or women. I'd love to hear just who you are and, you know, where you're coming from too.
Henry has a question.
Hi, Samina.
Hey,
Hi, thank you for being here. Your work is truly inspirational.
thank you.
In a brief response to the first question you had posed to the students in what our first impression when we think of Muslim women are, is being a computer science student right now at San Jose State, just transferred from Foothill College. I have worked with really intelligent Muslim women at both of those campuses, and it's just fascinating for me to see, you know, what their true potential is when we can be in a collaborative environment and work on one goal, which is scholarship in this case. The question I had for you, so much of your work was resonating to me because I've been 6 months in on a project related to student success and helping students not lose so much of parts of their identities that they hold so close and dear to their hearts as they're on this journey of education. But I guess my question for you is, if there were 3 essential steps to your writing processes and your writing systems, besides making the time and giving the space to write and read, what they would be?
I think that one of the things that I was telling, you know, Saba earlier is you have to get over your own fear. I think fear is one of the things that holds so many people back from saying. You know, even a writer like Roxane Gay, she talks about it. You know, she talks about how for so many years she didn't realize that her voice had power and that her voice would be meaningful. And, you know, once we accept that our own voice has power, and that the only person who can really, you know, empower what I'm trying to say is, once you realize that your voice has power and you actually step into that power and use your voice to bring about change, then I think that the world opens up in different ways. And I'm not saying that everyone welcomes you. You get a lot of, you know, especially now on social media, you get a lot of haters, but when you stand in your truth, that's the most important thing. And I think that now, especially when you amplify your voice and when you speak, there are so many different communities to collaborate with and to come together with in a way that, you know, wasn't possible 20 years ago, even when I was starting out. But now, you know, Muslim Americans are collaborating with Black Americans, are collaborating with Japanese Americans, are collaborating with American Mexicans, because a lot of what we're facing is so similar in so many ways. But aside from that, I think any writer among you, just know that your voice has power and it has meaning, and your perspective and your life does, and just put it out there. Look at all these people, look at, you know, the spoken word poetry, look at the last, the 1700 project that I just showed you, you know, the spoken word, like, oh my God, who wasn't moved by that? So one step, accept your power, because the thing that we don't do is we don't step into our power. That's the most important thing. Step into your power. Just make that leap.
Yeah, I have a quick question kind of following up on that. So when you say step into your power, how did you personally do that when you had a family that wasn't as supportive of you becoming a writer? And how did you cultivate that support system within yourself or within your community to really be able to fully step into your power?
You know, I feel like it is an ongoing process, right? And so it's not like I can say, oh, I stepped into my power, done. You know, it's not like that. You have to do it over and over and over and over again. And I was lucky because when I was first starting out, I was a sophomore in college, and I wrote my first short story. And because there wasn't anyone at home who was supportive, I submitted it to a writing contest. Asian American writing contest, and it actually was selected. I was selected as one of the winners, and I was then asked to come in and work with a very prominent writer named David Mura, who is Japanese American writer, and he helped me. And then I gave a reading at an American Asian conference, and there happened to be a Pulitzer Prize winning poet there named Garrett Hongo, and he heard my work and he tracked my career. So 2 years later, when I was graduating from undergrad, he called me and said, I want you to come to my writing program and I will pay your way. And at that point, you know, like when the universe steps in and says, here, let me help you out here, then I could say to my parents, I'm out of here, I'm going, because there are people who actually believe in what I'm saying and actually are supporting me. So that's how I got out of that. And is just, you know, when you start putting yourself out there in little ways and you start stepping into your power in little ways, I think that a community like that builds around you automatically, and then you can just keep taking the next step and the next step and the next step. And, you know, today the thing that holds me up is I get emails or I get people who reach out to me on social media pretty much every single day and say, thank you, and keep going. And I am so blessed to have that. And I respond to every single person just because I want them to know that it's their voices and their support that keeps me going. Because one of the things that I learned at the Nobel Women's Initiative is how everyone in my field just feels so alone. And we feel like we're not really making the change we want to make, and we're not really reaching people. And there's this sense of exhaustion that even the Nobel Peace Prize winners, they won a Nobel Peace Prize, and yet they felt it. You know, they felt alone, and that's why they do these conferences every 2 years so that it energizes them. And so it's so important to keep connecting and keep getting energized and keep moving along the way and knowing that, you know, you're helping. But there's no solution. It's an ongoing process.
Thank you so much.
You know, Samina, if I can break in just a minute here, I know this part of your story. I'm really glad that you were again referencing how you got started as a teen writer. But I also know that there was a really strong writers community in Minneapolis, and you've told me about it before. And so Samina got out there and she found the writers community. And we're in the Bay Area, like, hello. We have strong writers communities. And I don't know if Pavel is on with us today. He's not part of my class, but he's the co-founder of the Creative Release Literary Arts magazine. And it's an extraordinary, here, I'm going to do a little screen share on this. So this is their latest edition that's just coming out now. And so I really want to encourage you to, as writers, to get involved in this wonderful project. And I'm going to be sending the link to it and everything else, but it is a community, and Pavel has been extraordinary in forming a writers community that's not just at Foothill College. He's invited in local area high schools. He's got chapters on numerous campuses, and he's just a student at Foothill College, right? Like he's not teaching creative writing at Stanford yet. but looking actively for these communities. Samina also mentioned that she was featured on Poets and Writers magazine on the cover at one point, but nobody said you couldn't subscribe to that. You don't have to have won your first Pulitzer Prize before you start looking at these online resources and local community resources. And it's all about building a community. So when you step into your power, it's also stepping into your community.
Could I say a couple of words?
Absolutely.
Yeah, please do. Let me get rid of the stop share.
Yeah.
There we go.
I just want to say that this thing, that the creative release, although it gets largely credited to me, there's a team of people behind it. For example, Saba that spoke earlier today is on the team with us. And so in the classes around the campus, there are always people working on this thing. So you are saying about being alone and sort of writing alone and stuff like that. While it never really happens alone, you know, you don't really do anything by yourself, except perhaps writing stories. So everything sort of happens with other people, if you want it or not. And I just, I largely appreciate what you said about building a community and sort of the fact that someone has helped you at some point. And I think this is wonderful because it makes you feel like the world is sort of a connected place instead of just an isolated kind of point. And so I hope that Creative Release will also be on the mission to do that further on. Thanks, Scott, for the shout out.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that, you know, and you guys should definitely reach out, you know, if you guys ever want an editor at large or need help or advice or anything. You know, I'm here, I'm a local, and I can definitely help with something. So now that I'm here as a resource, I know, and I offer that because, you know, it meant the world to me when I was your guys' age, and David Mora stepped in and Garrett Hongo stepped in, and, you know, they helped me with my own work. And, you know, it just is so validating. So, you know, and I think, unless there's another question.
Yeah. Oh, you have plenty more to go.
You
Parsa
have
has a
time?
question now.
This is the point I usually break in because some of the students will need to begin leaving the room because they'll have other obligations, other classes, which is fine. So if you're in my class, we're essentially at the end point here of the official class time. Actually, we're 5 minutes over, so you can rush down the hallway. Not rush down the Zoom hallway if needed. But Samina, it's really up to you. As with an in-person event, often people linger afterwards for questions. And
oh, absolutely.
You have a family and a life and a teaching career and a new book coming out. So I'm going to leave it up to you, kind of how long you want to hang out with us.
Absolutely. No, I'm here. So I'm here. I'm welcome. You know, questions. I think Parsa, did you want to?
Yeah. I'm trying to look at the bigger picture here, and I'm aware of all the restrictions and violations of the women's rights in the Middle East. And there's been a lot of protests, but they haven't really resulted in anything. Yeah. And so my few questions are, is there hope for change, and what needs to happen for these countries to change their stance on women's rights, and how realistic is that?
You know, it's one of the things that really is upsetting to me too, because I do believe that, you know, a lot of what we hear, such as, you know, is only recently that women were allowed to vote in Saudi, only recently that women were allowed to drive a car in Saudi. There are so many Muslim countries that force women to wear the veil, you know, just as there are European countries that force women not to wear the veil. So I think, you know, the Arab uprisings was a time when women thought, oh, here, finally, I'm going to be heard. And you know, there were a lot of female street artists, graffiti artists who helped spread messages, like in Egypt, where the illiteracy rate is so high. And so female street artists would use graffiti to spread the message of what's happening in their nation and to get people in their country to come together at certain points. So, hey, we're all meeting, you know, 8 o'clock, you know, in this square, be there. And it would be, you know, on the street wall. And the next day, the government would come and whitewash everything, you know, but it was the message had already gotten out. So it's really sad when I see how many women were involved in things like that and overthrowing their governments and hoping for seats at the table, who, when it actually happened, you know, they say that these women are now in a worse place than when, you know, the Arab uprisings even happened. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take. I do know that because I have been working with Cartier, which is the jewelry, you know, the French jewelry line, on creating this pavilion for the Dubai World Expo that's happening. And I am on contract with the United Arab Emirates government. And it's been really distressing because one of the things that Cartier wants to do is show how women have accomplished a lot of different things, women around the world from all of time, not just Muslim women. They've accomplished a lot. So there's a pavilion where we're going to show all of women's accomplishments. And then as you walk through the pavilion, you're going to see the areas where women actually still have to go, the things that we still continue to need globally. And education is one of them. Women are dying at a really high rate in maternal mortality. And so that's an area where we want to showcase political representation as an area. So all of these areas where women across the board are being held back. And because I'm there to represent Muslim women and to include those voices, the United Arab Emirates government has said that I will not include women's voices, Muslim women voices, in those challenge areas. And they just want Muslim women included in the accomplishments. This is all we've achieved. And we will be absent from places where, because they think that it's a negative way to portray women and not just the reality. So when I face things like that, I just don't know what it's going to take. I really honestly don't know what it's going to take.
I appreciate it.
Andrea has a question? Or Andra?
Is that me? Oh no, I think
you?
before me.
Oh, okay. Oh. Do you not have a question?
No, I do. I just thought that someone's question was before me.
No. You're oh yeah, you have Jonah. Jonah's next.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Jonah.
Hold on. Okay, hi. My question kind of jumps on this bandwagon of is there hope, which I know you already kind of answered, but I was just wanted to get into specifics. And I know this isn't exactly the easiest question, but I still want to hear your opinion. So stigma, stereotype, media portrayal have all created an unrealistic picture of what we commonly believe Arab women to be. I mean, judging by the poems and the art that I've seen. What would break that status quo? Do we need an art museum like this in the US? Would that even be effective? And what kind of revolution maybe social revolution, could redefine a woman's role in society, or maybe shock people enough to rethink their misconceptions, in particular maybe of a Muslim woman? Or do schools just need to be better at preaching this? Will it ever be enough?
I think, and again, I just want to say, Muslims have been dealing with this in the US, at a really heightened level since 9/11. But if you look at other communities, if you look at what Black Americans have been dealing with for so long, and now racism is coming back. And if you look at what, Mexican Americans are dealing with, and, this is across the board. And I think that what is happening with organizations like Define American and other organizations like that is they are bringing together voices from all different communities. And I think it's important to collaborate, to hear each other's voices, to get experience, and to work on these issues together, because I think it all boils down, no matter what community it is, it all just boils down to ignorance, intolerance, hatred. And that's what you're fighting, and you're all fighting it on some level.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Andrea is next.
Okay. Hi. I found, to be honest, prior to today, I never heard of you or what you were preaching, but I think it's very inspiring. I think it's super, super cool. But I do have a question. It's kind of like a two-parter. First, I was just wondering, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that your predominant message is just that women, regardless of ethnic background or religion, should have the freedom of choice, regardless or not of whether it's to continue to live in this suppressed mindset or to use your voice, but the point is for choice. Like everyone should have their choices available to them. So my question is, as an author, I'm assuming that your audience in the US is more accepting because they're more open and they're more exposed to different types of people, different types of religions and races. Whereas in the more dominantly Muslim countries, that's pretty much what they're exposed to. So my question is, like, as an author, how do you write to empathize as well as preach your message of like having the option of choice while still respecting the religion that they have?
I think that for me, the reason, when I began this, I said, it's very important that people realize that I am a Muslim from Hyderabad, India, and that's my experience. And I say that because I don't believe that any artist, any writer should ever speak for an entire community.
Mm-hmm.
An artist's job is simply self-expression. This is what I believe, and this is the message I'm bringing to the world. And that message for me, of equality and gender justice is my message. And you're right, for me, it's not just about Muslim women. I really believe in, justice, whether it's racial justice, faith justice, gender justice. It's across the board. For me, I'm fighting on all those different levels. But again, I don't speak for anyone but me. And I think that's the message. If you get hope from my message, and if you can identify with my message and it moves you, then fantastic. I invite you in. But no artist, no writer will go out there and say, I am going to try to do this for everyone and speak for everyone. Because you can't. You simply can't. The only person you can speak for is yourself. I hope that answers your question.
In a way, but just like to follow up that quickly. So are you saying that like for you individually, like your purpose is just to express what's in your mind, not necessarily to like change what's happening? It's kind of just like an addition to what you're doing?
No, I am fully an artivist, which is an artist and an activist. That's who I am. And I believe that art is here to bring my message of change. And I think it has.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't speak for anyone but me.
Sure. Thank you.
So that's the point I'm saying. So that's why I don't feel burdened if women in the Middle East say, well, your message, doesn't represent me. Well, it's not meant to represent you. And so any artists here, I want you to carry that message away too. It is not your burden as an artist to represent anyone else. Your only burden as an artist is to represent yourself and your complex identity and your nuanced message, and to bring that to the world.
Oh, okay, sorry. So now that I understand what you're saying more clearly, but what I'm trying to say is, like, as an author, when you're writing like novels and things like that, even though you're writing from your experience, how do you, in a way, like get your reader to sort of relate to what you're saying if it's your own individual experience?
So what experience boils down to is emotion. And so when we read a book, it doesn't matter whose point of view that book is in. So to be honest, as Scott said, when I first began writing, there weren't any other models for me to look at of Muslim women. There just wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So to be honest, the first time I ever felt like I identified with what I was reading is when I was reading Toni Morrison, Paul Marshall, Audre Lorde, and I started seeing that there was a difference between womanism and feminism, and how one was a movement for white women and one was for Black women. And I was like, wait a minute, and it just exploded. For me, it just exploded my world. And so I was so inspired, and that's how I got into it. And I said, wait a minute, I need to speak my experience. Why was I so deeply moved by Toni Morrison? I don't share an experience with her. When she's writing about Beloved, I don't have that experience, but it's because of the human experience. It's because when we write, we are connecting with people. We're transcending boundaries of race, of culture, of religion, of history, and we are connecting with others on that emotional human level.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see what she's doing and I am deeply moved by it and inspired by it, you know, that's what my work, I hope, is, you know, doing, is that it's connecting with people on a human level. Like when you just saw the videos, when you just saw these videos, like the 1700 Project video, you know, they're connecting with you on a human level.
Thank you. But also, like, when you showed us that, the video I really enjoyed that you showed was the like the Paradise video.
Yeah.
And like the one thing that really like caught my eye was like the little girl, and I think she wrote like, I hope Justin Timberlake goes to heaven. And I was like, it really just proves that like no matter what you believe, like everyone is still like sort of like the same in the core. We all have like these things that we enjoy and that brings us pleasure, and it's not necessarily like your race, your religion, it doesn't like define who you are as like an individual. And I think that's really cool. So thank you for doing your work.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Is there a Huang? I guess Huang left.
Shanisa?
Shanisa? No, Shanisa.
Jamie?
Jamie?
Okay, finally.
Yay!
Yes.
Your message, like not only yesterday, but ever since we've started API Heritage Month, like I've been thinking about my cultural experiences, and I too want to write a book.
Good.
But it's hard, you know, like just going through the whole process and thinking of everything. I'm in this like brainstorming idea area of like understanding what I want to write about. But I guess my question would be, what advice do you have for young writers that want to talk about their cultural experiences?
Absolutely. I think that, my God, Jamie, you've got so much to say. I want you to go out there and say it. And the first thing to always remember is that the first draft is just about, you know, they call the first draft the down draft. And that's because all your first draft is doing is getting your words down on the paper. This is not where you come in. Stephen King says this is the draft where you leave the door closed, because no one else is supposed to see this draft. This is just between you and your higher or your lower self. It doesn't matter. This is where you just talk and get it out there. The second draft is called the up draft, or as Stephen King would say, this is the draft where now you open the door. And this is the door, this is the time when you let your editor in and you allow, this is when you start cleaning up. You do. So you never, ever should expect brilliance on the first draft, because that's going to hold you back. That's going to hold your message back. That's going to prevent you from writing. That's going to give you writer's block. When you set the bar really high, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get over it on the first draft.
Right.
Just to give you an idea, I have been stuck on page, for my second book, I've been stuck on page 48 for the past 1 year. 1 year. And I recently, maybe 3 or 4 days ago, finally had my breakthrough. Yeah, and so that, just to give you an idea, you know, and when I submitted this book to my agent, she called me, she's like, I love this book. And you know the last chapter? And I was like, yeah. She's like, you need to start it from there. So I had to throw the whole book out and start it from the first chapter and then move forward. So I'm telling you all this because I don't want you to give up. The most important thing, Jamie, that you can do is just keep going. Keep going, keep going. It's like the little engine that could, you know, you just build that community, you know, get into that journal that Scott had put up earlier, build a writer's community, get people around you who are in the same boat, who have the same messages, and, you know, fill each other's, I call it filling the well, because when you're writing, it's always about putting it out there, putting it out there, putting it out there. And then you've got to step back and you've got to fill the well, and that's where your community comes in.
Thank you so much for
Does that help at all?
Yeah, right. I mean, what's also really helping is this book we're reading called Shut Up and Write, because it gives a very like, it tells you it's okay. Like, you have to marinate your ideas, but it's also like you need to like have an idea of what's going on. And yesterday we read something called the alligator outline, which I did not like. And I was like, this is not helpful because I didn't like the way the outline was presented. Only thing I liked about it was that it's like, here's you, and you have to understand your audience, and then who's the line pointing to? Like, who is this message pointing to? And then the message is across the line, and then the legs are like different ideas you might hit along the way, you know. But I was like, okay, I need to try that, but at the same time, I think I'm just being kind of stubborn. And I love to just like start writing like a specific idea. And I really like the idea. It was like, take photos from your childhood and write about them. So it's been interesting too, because with these photographs, I haven't been really writing about them. I've just been talking about the photographs with my family members, because I look at each photo and like try to remember that memory, but I'm like 3 years old. I don't remember anything there. But my parents, they would just flip through them like, yeah, like, I took these, like, you know, it's not even big to me. So I want them to really elaborate on what was going on during that time. So I feel like I get more and more out of hearing those stories.
Good. You know, and one of the things you're going to find, all of you who are working on art in any way, or book, or writing your book, is that the first time you write something, what you're doing is you're learning about your own individual process as an artist. And that's the most important thing too, because no two writers have the same process. And so, you know, like I was saying, Toni Morrison was one of my first inspirations. And she said that when she started a new book, she would see that book as a color. And that color would be what she wants. So it would create the mood of the book, and then she would create the story based on that color. I mean, that just blows my mind. I could never do that. You know, like, so, and other writers do have a very strict outline, and they follow that outline very clearly. And, you know, it's, so during this process, Jamie, pay attention to your process.
Yeah.
Say, this is what inspires me. This is not speaking to me. This is not resonating with me, but I like this and I like this. And just monitor that as you're going, and then respect that it's just part of your process, and you're going to get to where you need to go.
Thank you so much. I definitely feel really inspired from today, as I do every time we meet new people on Zoom. But I feel like specifically knowing like that I was going to hear from you today, I was like, I need to ask her about her process, because you literally teach creative writing, and I definitely want to minor in that. So
good.
Thank you so much.
I can't wait to read your book.
It's orange so far. The first day, like I had like the idea for the book, I did a little like cover, like I painted a cover for it, because I was like, I need to visualize it. I'm a visual learner, so it's orange.
Okay, I love that.
Color orange.
The color orange.
That's not the title, but I will not give that away.
No, don't.
I think we've that sounds like a good place to end. Samina probably has a life, and the rest of us do too. I'm so glad that you got some one-on-one time, those of you that have lingered a little bit longer. And then I'm going to do my little closer, because I want to remind everybody that one of the great things about Zoom is that we record these videos, and then they're available. So my students know, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. As my students know, but I want to remind everybody that Foothill's API Heritage Month website at foothill.edu has the Zoom links to future talks. We're going to be joined by Andrew Lam, live from Saigon on the 45th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, live from Ho Chi Minh City. That'll be amazing. That's on the 30th. Viola Lasmana, who's a former Foothill student and now is a postdoc teaching at USC, will be joining us next Tuesday. And so a little advertisement for that. Also, if you want to go back and re-listen to some of the words of wisdom that Samina has shared with us, that Zoom link will be there, or that archive link will be on this webpage very soon, and on my Scott Langford at Foothill, YouTube channel. And then having said all that, I just want to thank Samina one more time for your generosity and your words and your wisdom. I've known Samina a long time, and I'm always a little astonished at one of the first things I did when I first met her was come to a class that she was teaching to evaluate it, because I was the dean at the time. And I was amazed at the rapport and the power of her teaching. So you still got that going on, Samina, and I think that's part of what makes you such a fine writer. And I think it's a good way to underline for Jamie and others that have writing ambitions that frequently the best writing that you do is in conversation first. And so knowing that about your process, it's not true with everyone, but it's certainly true that many of us, Scott included, will often write with our mouths first, and then you hear yourself saying this. You're talking to your family about this photograph, or you're talking with your writers group about page 48 that you're stuck on, and suddenly some part of your brain goes bling, like that. But I think Samina is brilliant in creating those communities. She creates communities online. She creates communities within her own faith community. She's creating communities for writers, and I just want to thank her for still being part of Foothill College and all of our lives. So thank you so much, Samina Ali, for being with us.
It's been a pleasure to hear from all of you and to engage with as many of you as I could. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to get to all of the questions, because that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we usually say, Samina, that people can contact me if they want to contact you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to be continued, if any of you students want to have more interaction, Samina is very generous.
And if you guys, if you guys want to, talk more writing and et cetera, I mean, it's true what Scott's saying. A lot of my students, even at Stanford, once, they've been in my classes for a while, have now approached me and said, let's just do our own private classes. So I actually work with a lot of the Stanford students just privately, and it's just, so I'm here, I'm available, I can, help you guys.
All right.
Yeah, I have one last question just to wrap things up. What do you think, how do you think we can educate the American public about the Muslim cultures and a lot of different the different varieties of Muslims? As someone who grows up in the Bay Area, something that's pretty liberal, we were mostly introduced to South Indian and East Asian stories, in addition to the canon of Western fairy tales.
Well, I think, James Baldwin long ago, he had a decision to make, and it was that he could write his book or he could not. And when he stepped up and said, I'm going to write this book, and he did, it changed the conversation that was happening. Mm-hmm. And I think that, any one of us today has to look back into history, and I'm not going to deny that people have been doing what I'm doing for years and years and years, long before me. And so I am so grateful for everything that's already been done out there, and I take my inspiration from them. And I say to all of you, look to your forefathers, to people who've come before you, your literary forefathers, I'm talking about, and see what they've done and see how they've been able to create a movement and go out there and continue. Because I think the most important thing is to remember that what I always tell people is that we're like a spoke. You individually are like one spoke on a wheel. Mm-hmm. That's it. But if that spoke breaks, that wheel is no longer going to turn. So what you have to realize is that you're an important part of that movement toward justice, or that movement toward equality, or whatever that movement is that you want to make. But to respect every other spoke. Some of the spokes you're going to really disagree with and hate and wish they would die. But there are others who you can, really work with. But you have to respect every single spoke on the wheel, because that's what turns it. And that's what moves that. So remember who you are, remember your place, and keep that wheel going and get your voice out there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samina. I'm going to go ahead and close the recording. recording, and thank you once again for being here.
Absolutely.
And,